like to call the Select Board Tuesday, April 19th meeting to order. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So a couple things going on tonight here. We obviously have a new board in front of us tonight. And so introduce Caroline and Tom to the Select Board. Tom is remote, so I think we need to do our attendance individually. So I think we just need to say, so we'll start with me. William Olson here.
Jamie Knudsen here.
Sean Farrell here.
Caroline Beaulieu here.
And Tom.
Yeah, Tom Myers here, remote.
Thank you, and welcome to the board, and looking forward to getting you up to speed on all the issues we got going on, and thank you for running. And we also like to thank Rosemary and Darcy for their service over the last 3 years, and they were been beneficial to the town, and we hope to keep them involved in some of the boards and committees that need their help. So we'll talk about that when we talk about our liaison positions. We also have FinCom joining, but they will join us officially at 7:15 after we elect our new board. So you guys can do that at that point. So board, our new officers of the board. For board and committee openings, we have one opening for the Historic District Commission from a Board of Realty member. We have one opening for the Capital Committee, one opening for Conservation Commission, one opening for Council on Aging, and I think we may have somebody who can fill that role. We have one opening for Affordable Housing Trust, and I saw an application submitted today for that, so we can talk about that next time. One opening from the Housing Authority for the Human Rights Commission, and one opening for Hamilton resident on the Hamilton Wenham Recreation Board. Now is the time in our meeting for public comment, up to 3 minutes for topics that are not already on the agenda. I will start in the room here. And raise your hand virtually raise your hand online if you have any comments. And you can let me know if you see them. Raise hand. Okay. For Select Board, Tom Manager report. So Joe is off today. So I'm not sure if you're going to give any sort of update on his report.
Updates at this time?
Okay. And then obviously with elections, we haven't probably done a lot with so like I said, my big message was just to welcome everyone and looking forward to the next year. Anybody else have any comments? Do you have, Jamie, anything? Any updates?
No, I don't think so.
I'd like to hear how excited you are that I'm here. If you could.
I'll abstain from that.
Sean, you got
I
anything?
really don't have anything, but I will mention that our last meeting, we had the Chief of Police in talking about Autism Awareness Month. And coming up on the 26th, if you're ordering pizza or other items from, is it Five Sons in town, that you mentioned it's Autism Awareness Month, and you could get your pizza or food delivered by one of our fine Wenham or Hamilton police officers, and a percentage of that goes to charity. So.
That's correct, yeah. And I have my bracelet on that was given to us by the chief. All right, and then Tom or Caroline, do you have any selectmen reports or select board reports? All right.
No, nothing.
So then we go down to the consent agenda. We have 3 things on the consent agenda, although one has been pulled. We have had approved minutes from the Select Board meeting of March 7th. We have the approved minutes of the joint Select Board of FinCom meeting from March 15th. And then we had approved the use of Patton Park for a Ukraine vigil. That has been pulled because they're going to do something. I think the other community house is going to do something. They're just going to utilize that event and join that event. So can I have a consent motion to approve the 2 meeting minutes?
I move to approve the consent agenda, including the approved meeting minutes of the Select Board on March 7, 2022, and the joint Select Board and Finance Advisory Committee meeting on March 15th, 2022.
I'll second that.
Second from Sean, and then we'll have to do a roll call vote. So any further discussion? All right, so For Tom, I recommend you abstain because you weren't here for those minutes. That's fine, so you just have to abstain for those. So we'll start with myself, William Olson, aye.
Jerry Knutson, aye.
Sean Farrell, aye.
Carolyn, will you abstain?
Tom Myers, abstain.
Okay. So we have 3 ayes and 2 abstains. All right, now we will go to the agenda. So this is what we do after the election, is we vote for a new officer of the board, and there's 3 positions we need to fill tonight. So there's chair, there's vice chair, and clerk. And so we typically start with the chair and work our way down. So do I have a motion to nominate anybody for the chair?
I would move that Sean Farrell be the chair of the select board.
I will second that. So for further discussion, Sean, would you?
Would I be willing to do that? I'll accept the nomination, yes.
Oh,
No,
what a guy.
I enjoyed doing it last year, and I think that would be good to have Sean.
Enough to do it again? Because, you know. No? Okay.
So any further discussion on Sean? All right, so we will do a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. William Olson, aye.
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Caroline Beaulieu, aye.
Tom
Tom Myers, aye.
and Sean.
And I won't vote for myself, I'll abstain.
Okay, so now the chair, now we need a motion to recommend someone for vice chair. So I'd like to make a motion to nominate Jamie Knutson for vice chair.
I'll second that if he's willing.
So further discussion, Jamie, you want to
Guess
accept that?
I'll accept the nomination, yes.
Any other discussion? I mean, that's what you did the last year, and I think.
Did
yeah,
a bang-up job.
Bang up
Did a
job.
bang-up
So
job,
good.
we let him do it again.
An inspiration, to be sure.
All right, so all those in favor say aye. I'll start the roll call vote. So William Olson, aye. Sean
Sean Farrell, aye.
Caroline Beaulieu, aye.
and Tom.
Tom Myers, aye.
And now we need a motion to recommend a clerk. So,
I'll make a motion to nominate Caroline for the clerk.
Second.
second that. So for further discussion, let's explain to Caroline what the clerk does.
Everything that no one else wants to do.
Your most important position, obviously, is to track the meeting minutes to make sure they're done correctly, that you get with the minute taker, and you do the proofread, and you make sure they get circulated, and make sure they get on the meeting minutes within a couple weeks, and they make sure they get filed appropriately. So there's other things that you'll do, and Sean, maybe, so I'm trying to think of other things that,
Will you be mentoring me in this
Sure,
position? Okay.
Yeah, and Jamie's been clerk before, so he can show you the ropes as well.
Upon mentorship, I accept the nomination.
okay. All right, any further discussion? All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. William Olson, aye.
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Sean Farrell, aye.
Tom
Tom Myers, aye.
and Caroline?
I'm not voting for myself.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, so we have 4 ayes and 1 abstain. So now we have elected our new officer of the board. So for the rest of the meeting, Sean will be the chair. So
All right.
thank you for letting me serve over last year.
Thank you, Bill.
And thank you, Sean, for stepping up. Appreciate it.
All
There's
right.
some things I can help out with in the meeting just because I'd met with Joe, but
Yeah, that's perfect.
I will look to your direction.
So I would suppose at this time we'll open the floor for the Finance Committee to open a meeting with us.
Great, thank you. And congratulations, everyone, on your new positions, and welcome. So I'm going to call the Hamilton Finance and Advisory Committee meeting to order at 7:10. You guys are early, right on track. 7:10 PM on April 19th. We have 2 of our members present in person, and I think 3 remotely. So Christina Shankar-Grove is here.
Nick Tenson here.
Dave Langer here.
John Perlich here.
John McGrath here.
Great, thanks, everyone.
All right, so tonight we have, excuse me, a report for the fiscal year 2021 town audit. We have Jim here from CLA, who is going to walk us through. Hi, Jim, how you doing?
Doing good, Sean. How are you?
I'm good.
Good to see everybody. I'm going to give a handouts here to everybody in person.
Take one and pass it on, huh?
And now, Jim, we kind of, you're old hat to some of us here, no offense, but we see you kind of every year, but we have a couple new members. So if you could just kind of give a quick overview on what you do and why we're doing it.
Of course, and I'll cover some of that material in the presentation, but thank you all for having me here tonight. My name is Jim Petrowski. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, or CLA. I have worked on the town's audit this year. I was in charge of the overall responsibility for the engagement, really just a review with quality control review of the work papers, also supervising the team staff, working closely with Diane and Alex. I was not the signer on the report. That was done by another principal. However, I was heavily involved as one of the principals in this engagement, really overseeing and strategizing the audit this year. So I've worked with the town multiple years as well. I know there's a few familiar faces here tonight. So, okay, so to get into the presentation, just to give an overview, we'll go over the terms of the engagement, why we're here, why we're conducting the audit, what we're going to produce as a result. I'll go through an executive summary of the results of the audit. We'll go over some key financial statement highlights, some key footnotes in the financial statements. I'll discuss the management letter, some of the comments noted in that report, and then we'll go through some required communications. I will pause briefly throughout the presentation just to ask if there's any questions along the way, and we'll go from there. So why I am here and why we conduct the audit, basically we're engaged by the town to provide really three main communications. The first being we're expressing an opinion on the GAAP financial statements the town produces, on whether those financial statements are fairly presented in all material aspects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Now, what the audit entails is we're obviously looking at all the underlying transactions on the financial statement, so if anything were to come up, that's the second communication about providing the report on internal control. Now, that is not an opinion on the effectiveness of internal control. However, if something ever came up during the audit, such as a significant deficiency or material weakness, it would be noted in that internal control report. And then lastly, as part of the audit, we do have to make a few other required communications to the select board as well as to management, those to management being more best practice nature and comments. So to get into the results of those communications, so you'll see on page 1 of the financial statements that this year's opinion on the financial statements was unmodified. So once again, the town received really, it's the best opinion available. It means that in our opinion as auditors that those financial statements are fair and are accurately presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. You'll also see in the internal control report, internal control over financial reporting, compliance with laws and regulations, there were no findings noted in that report, so overall clean, nothing to report from the audit on that end. The governance communication letter, that's a separate deliverable addressed to the board. We'll go over the required communications later on in the presentation. And then lastly, the management letter, again, not significant, but best practice recommendations. There were 4 comments this year, 3 being recurring comments and 1 being informational as we get into fiscal '22. So I'll just get into some of the financial highlights to start. You'll see on page 12 of the financial statements, the town's government-wide governmental activities net position at year end totaled $14.4 million. Just a key point there, the unrestricted amount was a net deficit of $7.8 million. This isn't necessarily uncommon. It's a result of the net pension, net OPEB liabilities. Those totaled around $14 million at June 30th of '21. It's common for those to offset the town's government-wide net position held in that financial statement. And just to give a comparison of the prior year, that was an increase in net position of $2.5 million. So as we move on to the general fund, you'll see on page 15, I'll just highlight the general fund's fund balance at year end was $9.7 million. You'll see the key components broken out here as far as how that is represented. I'll just call attention, the capital stabilization fund is reported in committed fund balance. That was $1.4 million. And then as part of that, unassigned fund balance at year end, it totaled $6.4 million. $1.7 million of that was the general stabilization fund. And just to give an idea, that was around a $1.3 million increase from the prior year. And when we look at it in relation to expenditures and transfers out, your unassigned fund balance is around 20% of expenditures and transfers out. So overall, pretty healthy fund balance when we look at the key ratios of the unassigned fund balance to expenditures. So I did just want to also highlight in the financial statements the OPEB trust. So as a result of the formal adoption of the OPEB trust this year, the town reported the OPEB trust as a fiduciary fund. You'll see on pages 22 and 23 that ending net position was around $1 million. The activities for contributions, those totaled around $1.2 million. $971,000 is actual trust contributions, with the remainder being benefits actually paid to retirees from the general fund. It's an in and out contribution for the $209,000. And then the trust also received investment income of $51,000 as well. So to stay on the theme of OPEB, wanted to call attention to Note 11, pages 51 to 54, just to give an overview of the net OPEB liability. Again, totaled $3.9 million this year. You'll see the breakouts for the governmental activities in the Water Enterprise Fund. This year, it's key to note that was calculated using a 6.68% discount rate. It was previously around half that discount rate. That's really the direct result of adopting the OPEB trust this year. And as noted in the valuation report, that actually reduced the OPEB liability significantly in adopting that OPEB trust. You'll also see in these disclosures as some key sensitivity figures. They'll give some insight as to if that discount rate were to change by a percentage point. And then you'll also see the trend in changes in healthcare costs and what those look like in terms of if those costs were to go up or to go down, how that impacts the net OPEB liability.
Which is substantial.
Yes.
When you look at how much that 1% adds up, it's a lot.
Yeah, definitely significant change too with that with the trust being adopted this year as well. So we get into the pension plan, note 15, pages 56 to 60. The town's net pension liability was $10.8 million at year end, 10.2 of which was reported in the governmental activities. It is key to note that of this actually represents the town's proportionate share of the overall liability of Essex Regional Retirement System. So Essex Regional obviously holds the investments, they pay the benefits, but the town's assigned a share of that collective liability. That share was around 2.7% at year end, pretty similar to the prior year. And then also, similar to OPEB, you'll see that there's some sensitivity disclosures regarding changes in that discount rate. Obviously, some pretty significant changes similar to OPEB if that discount rate were to change. So with that said, I'll stop and open it up for any questions on the financial statements.
Well, would you please just define for us the term discount rate?
Sure, that's the rate that's actually being used to discount the present value of all the future pension and OPEB benefits to a present day liability. So it's really just the time value of money figure there.
Thank you.
Hey, this is John McGrath. I'm on the Finance Committee. Thanks for coming in tonight. Appreciate it. Generally, your report is for a single year or a year-over-year view. Before you get into these comments, which I think you said have been recurring, have you observed any trends over the last several years that would be concerning? So financial trends. And it appears the financial statements are of high quality and the financial operations are of high quality. I'm just wondering if you've observed any financial trends that you either have called out in footnotes or you would want to raise as areas of caution.
Understood, and thank you for the question, John. You know, I think there, overall, if we look at the trend over the past few years and just looking at that overall general fund balance, from an audit perspective, we felt that to actually be a pretty strong fund balance. And that's really one of the key figures we would typically look at during the course of the audit. So we feel that from short-term financial health in that general fund balance, we feel like it's a pretty strong figure. I will say, if we talk about things that are concerning, it wasn't necessarily a concern, but I feel like the adoption of that OPEB trust was something where, in our discussions, just being able to count that towards the OPEB liability, which is real, it's going to be coming up over time. I feel like that was an important step to have that trust adopted, so that way you guys could get the credit for that investment balance that was held there. I think that was one of the things that we would look at as an improvement from prior years, where now you guys get the credit for holding those investments for OPEB. Other than that, nothing specific comes to mind as far as significant concerns. And again, if anything did come up, we would report it in our internal control report, but just nothing specific comes to mind.
Right. And maybe a couple of follow-ups. So one is, we also observed that the school district this year did the same thing. So I know you're not auditing their books, at least I don't think you are, but they established a pretty substantial OPEB trust, and I'm expecting that they'll derive some of the same benefits as the town. That's just more of an observation. And one final question. In your practice, are you able to highlight for the town areas where similar municipalities have run into trouble? So this question isn't specifically about us, but drawing on all the work you do for other municipalities of the same size, are there areas that one might look out for, or have you seen areas where other municipalities have gotten into areas of concern? So this is, again, not a specific to Hamilton, but just curious if you have any items you could share as watch items.
Sure, no, I can appreciate the question, and honestly, I think three come to mind right off the bat. And I think one being the OPEB trust, taking the step of adopting that, it's not something that every municipality actually does, and as a result, those liabilities are creeping up in the municipalities that haven't adopted it. So not of concern to the town, obviously, at this point, however, that is something that has crept up in other spots. I think the other two would be, I'm going to discuss it as part of the management letter. One being the implementation of GASB Statement Number 87. It could be, depending on the volume of lease activities, there's a lot of work that a lot of municipalities have to do to identify those leases that are outstanding, and a big concern there is also the embedded leases as part of those contracts. So it's something where, as we get into fiscal '22, that's going to be really important for us to be able to take a dive into what leases are actually outstanding, and can we get those appropriately reported in the financial statements. Now, it may not impact this town as much as others, but it is a big concern heading into fiscal '22. And I think lastly, as far as concerns, I think information technology is something that you really can never pay enough attention to. Just we look at the evolving risks surrounding that area. We're always going to recommend that assessments be performed, that external assessments be performed. It is a very big risk right now. There are a lot of instances you'll hear in the news and see in articles that there are instances of municipalities getting hacked. It's probably, I mean, that could be the biggest concern, in terms of overall risk and security. So I think those three are the ones that stand out for me.
Okay, thanks very much.
Anything from anybody here? Jamie, Bill, or
Just a question
Caroline?
on the fund you talked about. So page 55 talks about the funds, correct? Just walk us through, like, note 13. I'm trying to figure out how note 13 relates to that spreadsheet. In terms of this, we said we have three funds, right? We have general, recreational field, and capital stabilization funds.
Correct.
So where does the 1683971 lie on that spreadsheet on page 55?
Are we talking about the unassigned? Oh, sorry, the general stabilization?
Yes.
That will actually be present in the unassigned fund balance. It's in the total of the 6.4 million it's reported as part of that 6.4. So it's not broken out separately, but there's a narrative disclosure on the subsequent page to detail, here's all the stabilization funds, and here's where they're reported.
So we have 3 funds, and only 3 funds that require 2/3 vote. Those are the 3 funds. I'm just trying to clarify that. I forgot that the recreational field stabilization fund was a 2/3 vote.
2/3, yeah.
That's to take money out of them.
Yeah, correct.
And then the subsequent year's expenditures on that chart on page note 12, fund balance, what does that represent?
Just the votes at fiscal '22 town meeting from free cash.
That's free cash, right? That's
Yep.
the free cash, okay. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure, that's the free cash. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, on to the management.
Okay, so I touched upon a couple of these points just now, but to get into the comments, so there were 3 repeat, 1 being related to the building permits, just not material difference when we looked at the activities by the department and compared them to the books and records. There was a difference there. We do want to recommend, as far as building permits activities, that there's a formal reconciliation performed between the book and record as well as the departmental records. Just something where, if you ever had a significant increase in volume, something that could materially impact the financial statements, that reconciliation process is important. Make sure everything's captured in the financial statements. Information technology, so similar comment to the prior year, was whittled down a bit from some of the observations in the prior year, but just recommending documented policies and procedures, making sure there's an acknowledgement of reading those documented policies and procedures. We do want to recommend external assessments be performed, penetration testing, just with the risks these days, just it's always going to be something that we recommend that the town have performed. You'll see there's some password security recommendations. Just when we looked at the current password settings and compare them to best practices, there's some recommendations there as to how to strengthen those passwords. And then lastly, just a vendor management program for any vendors the town works with, that those are analyzed and that there's a risk assessment performed relating to vendors the town interacts with. Risk
Hey,
assessment.
Jim, excuse me, John McGrath again. Was the building permit item a repeat or recurring item?
That was a repeat item.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So risk assessment and monitoring is really just, this is a common comment for multiple clients, but just as we all know that risks are consistently evolving related to financial statement activities. For any community that doesn't have a formal risk assessment and monitoring plan, we want to recommend that one be formalized and incorporated into the documented policies and procedures. This should encompass documented monitoring as well as risk assessment, really looking at the town's departments overall, determining if there's any that should be looked at, actually doing the follow-up and looking at those departments, and then following and documenting if there's any issues identified. So just having that process in place year to year, we'll find will be beneficial, just to make sure that departments are properly monitored and their financial activities are if there's any opportunities identified to strengthen those departmental controls, the risk assessment and monitoring can identify that. And then lastly, the lease accounting and financial reporting. Previously, there were 2 types of leases that could be reported in the financial statements. This standard is now going to uniform, how could I say it? It's going to make the lease reporting uniform in a sense that any lease that's outstanding from the town's perspective is going to be reported on the government-wide statement in that position as an asset or a liability. In addition to that, there's going to be disclosure requirements. Now, from the town's perspective, it may not be a material impact. However, like I mentioned before, it's something where as part of the audit, we want to make sure that all the leases are captured in the town's analysis to determine if that total lease balance outstanding is material to the town's financial statement. So something we'll dig into for fiscal '22.
I'm sorry, Nick Tenson. Have you looked at our leases at all in the past?
The lease agreements will typically scan through the activities to see if we'll do completeness testing to make sure that everything's captured. This year, it's just with the implementation, there's going to be a lot more focus on it. We'll typically look and see if there's anything material, and it is a typical part of the audit. This year, just where it's required now to have everything uniform. It's more important to make sure that a full analysis is performed at the management level. So,
And what I really want to know is, do we have a lot of leases?
not that stand out. I think what we have to be careful of is if we look at the contracts that the town has outstanding, if there's anything embedded in those contracts, that's probably going to be more of a focus for this year than in prior years.
Quick comment and a question. First of all, management letter, just from my perspective, looks really good. I note that last year's had, well, some of the same items, had a bunch of other ones that have been cleaned up. And I know really over the past several years, it's always been a endeavor from the finance department to sort of work on these recommendations and implement as many as can be implemented within a year. So hats off to town management and finance department on that. And I did notice that the management letter didn't have a town response. I didn't know if there was a reason for that this year, or if it was a question of Alex and Joe needing more time to come up with responses.
Joe and I are still determining whether we're going to provide an official town response. Some communities do not, some do, and so we're kind of weighing that internally right now. We're bouncing ideas around still.
And I do just also want to mention on that, it has become more standardized in our firm to issue the management letter without including those responses. We're happy to work to the town's preference, but it is becoming more common to issue those without responses included.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good question, John. Any other questions from Select Board or FinCom? Or comments?
Is there an official process by which you guys sort of review and prioritize those recommendations in the management letter? Or is it just at the discretion of y'all? Trust you implicitly.
Sure,
Just wondering.
yeah. It sort of depends on how strong the recommendation comes from the audit team. If there's a material weakness, that would be something that would need to be addressed immediately. If there are some things that's a best practice comment, we have to assess our sort of operational abilities to implement those, whether we can bite off the entire recommendation or if we can take dribs and drabs at a time. For example, that we're getting pressured from our insurance carrier to enhance our information technology security. So, that in concert with the audit recommendation, we're going to be focusing on that this year. Same with the lease accounting, financial reporting. It's a GASB requirement now, so we'll have to put a little more emphasis on that. So if we had unlimited resources, we could tackle all of these straight away. If we had, we can, for example, building permits, we could get a Munis module for that. But with that comes added training, additional annual costs. And so we have to weigh, what the sort of the deliverable is on that. And so everything is, I guess, a judgment call.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say typically over the years that I've been here, the management letter usually gives us probably 4 to 6, 7 things they recommend. And many times it's kind of very much low-hanging fruit and not really significant. It's not a damaging thing. Usually it's a pretty benign thing for the most part. And as Alex was saying, it's typically something that we either don't have staffing for or funding for. But at least in the past, it's been that. So we've been trying to kind of chip away at these little things. And, I think a lot of years we had recommendation in the management letter for our recreation, our receipts. We were taking cash at the pool in different places like that, and the worry was that between bringing it to the pool and town hall and depositing and stuff like that, and we've since rectified that with the kind of a point-of-sale system. So, things like that has been waiting on staffing and funding. So, for the most part, it's an overall a really great audit for us.
Thanks.
Anything else, anybody?
So just to conclude with our other required communications we have to make to the board, and the significant accounting policies, management's responsible for adopting those. They're all described in Note 1. As part of the audit, we didn't identify any sort of transactions which lacked authoritative guidance. We found the note disclosures to be neutral, consistent, and clear. We didn't encounter any difficulties as part of the audit, no disagreements with management. As far as the audit adjustments, those were provided as part of the governance communication. There were no uncorrected misstatements, so nothing proposed to management that wasn't corrected. We did request certain management representations included in our management representation letter. We weren't aware of any consultations with any other accounting firms or other independent accountants, and any significant issues that would have come up during the audit is really throughout the course of our professional relationship, nothing unusual or out of the ordinary. And with that, I do just want to thank Alex, as well as Diane, Peggy, Joe, just for their input and assistance throughout the process on getting us our information. They always make it really smooth for us when we come on site. I just want to thank those folks for their help this year.
Any other questions for Jim? Anybody online, any questions?
All set.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Jim.
everyone.
Appreciate you coming, and appreciate the FinCom joining us tonight to kind of kill two birds with one stone, as they say.
Nice, smooth.
It's feeding
Report.
2 birds with 1 scone now.
Oh, feeding two birds with one stone.
Peter.
That's much more.
Peter
I
has a-
appreciate
yeah.
that.
You're welcome.
John agrees.
Yeah, this is
must
great. We
stay
got it
going.
all done together, so
Yep.
I think that means that we can adjourn now.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
I leave you in your peace.
Anxious.
You have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
FinCom adjourns?
Second.
Dave Wang, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Nick Tenson, aye.
Dave Wanger, aye.
John Prulidge, aye.
John McGrath, aye.
And Christina Shank Hargrove, aye. Our shortest meeting ever. I think it was half an hour long. Thank you.
Congratulations to the new members of the board, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Definitely.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, FinCom. And you're more than welcome to stay.
You don't have to leave.
Thank you.
There's no limit.
There's no limit for your participation. All right, so up next, we have the appointment of Corey Beaulieu as an associate member of the Planning Board, discussion and vote. So in front of us in our packets, we have Corey's application as well as a recommendation from the Planning Board. Any, when do you want to make a motion, and then we can move on to any discussion?
I make a motion to appoint Corey Beaulieu as an associate member of the planning board.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I sat on the planning board meeting last week, and due to the project that's been going on at where the edges,
133.
133.
133 Essex, yeah, that's okay.
133 they, they're probably not gonna vote till the summer. They wanna make sure they have enough members who have gone to all the hearings. And so Corey has volunteered to remain on the board as an associate member through the vote. So it makes sense to include him.
Right, and Corey's been on the, about 2 years, I think.
Yes.
That's my understanding as well.
All right, so we've got a motion, a second. Move the vote. All those in favor, say aye. We'll start with a roll call. We'll start with Bill.
William Wilson, aye.
Jamie?
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Tom?
Tom Myers, aye.
Carolyn Beaulieu, abstain.
All right, and Sean Farrell, aye. Motion passes. Welcome to the club, Corey. Or remaining in the club, I guess, for planning board.
Enjoy yourself.
Yes. All right, up next, we have Select Board Committee Liaison Appointments, discussion only. So in your packet is a list of our numerous boards and committees. And thanks to Jamie's email a little bit early in the week, we've added some in there that we were missing.
Is it added now?
I think, I'm just going to look through it now. I think it's in there now.
Oh, we gotta do it.
Yeah, I see the Hamilton Climate Action Team, and
That was already in there.
that was already in there. The,
Do I have an old one? I don't see the master planning. Is that one in there?
Hamilton, I don't see the master planning one either.
It's on the emails, it's up on the board.
Oh, it's on the newer,
updated
it's on the updated. Oh, that's right. Lori sent an updated email, I think.
Yeah, here it
It's
is.
not.
Yeah, it's in
back.
the newest version has it. I just pulled it up. Yeah, it's all in there. Master planning to the bottom there.
So Basically, what we do as a board for Tom and Caroline, you kind of pick your favorites here.
I could never.
And just put an X there, and then you can circulate it back to myself. And then Jamie and I will get together and kind of compile all of the, the most like there for each person and assign them accordingly. And the role of the liaison, it can be all-encompassing or just a call or an email to the chair after the meeting to kind of catch up on what happened. You don't have to attend all the meetings. Some people choose to for a little while to introduce themselves and get to know the boards a little bit. But you can also call the chair and just ask how the meeting went. And then when we come back as a select board, you can just report out on what you've learned from each of those boards and committees that you're liaison to if they met in the previous weeks.
Yeah, and the cadence is very different for all these boards. They all meet different days, different weeks, different cadence.
Right, some are monthly, some are bi-weekly, some are quarterly, so I would, if you have any questions on a board that you think you might be interested in, but you just don't know when they meet, check the town calendar. You can reach out to Jamie, Bill, or myself to kind of give you the cadence of when they meet to see kind of what commitment it will be for you.
How many of these are we supposed to?
Well, I don't know the new number, but we kind of, it's like 5 or 6 probably that you're gonna pick. Because I think.
So should we just, you said just mark the sort of 5 or 6 that we are most interested in? Is that sort of the process now?
Yeah.
You could put them in. You could put numbers of 1 through 6 of your most preferred to least preferred.
Yeah, that would be fine. I think that's fine. Instead of an X, you can just put say your top choice is the Conservation Commission. You can put that as number 1, and so on and so forth.
Because between the 6 of us, we need coverage on all of them.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And there's a
Sometimes
couple
we
there
duplicated,
that
but-
are town manager. You can see there's an X already in the MAPC as well as the Veteran Services. And then we have, I believe, the North Shore Technical High School has somebody already, so you can put an X in that one. And there's another one, the MBTA one, you can put an X in. I believe we already have a rep for that one. As far as I know, those are the only ones that are already kind of spoken for.
Including the ones that y'all have already spoken for? Or are y'all going to reassess?
We'll all reassess every
Got
year.
it.
We
Okay.
reassess. And some of them, you'll notice there's a little asterisk next to, like the Community Preservation Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust. That means you're an actual voting member of the board instead of just a liaison. So you would have to go to those meetings.
Okay.
So we're thinking that we'll get it back to you in a week, and then we talk.
Yeah, it
about
would be great if we could get it probably within a week, and then Jamie and I can meet and discuss and then figure it all out for the next meeting. So we're not missing too many of these meetings that we're behind in any news that we should be sharing with people.
Yeah, that's no problem.
So like by the 26th, is that?
Yeah. And if you're having trouble figuring it out, obviously just let me know and we can work it out.
And the only thing we can talk about next time as well is for consistency and continuity, I would think it'd be important to, I'm going to recommend that we keep Rosemary involved on the master plan committee.
Yeah.
We need to make a vote to increase the
Membership. Yeah, so I'll make sure to put that on the next agenda. Then I was going to recommend the same thing. And I feel that we're at 9 members now for the master plan committee, and that will put us at 10, which is an even number, which is usually a no-no for a board or committee. But they're really not voting on anything really, significant that's going to cause, I think, any controversy. So I don't see it being an issue.
Oh, there's still time.
We can debate that next time if we think we need to have a tiebreaker.
Yeah, we have a tiebreaker, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, so makes sense.
All right, any other questions on that?
No, sir.
Okay. And then we have, next up is our Hamilton one-day liquor license policy, review and discussion of possible amendments and vote. And Joe redlined some of this. This is in the packets.
So, yes, so the goal when we came up with this was that we wanted to have one document and one application to cover all one-day liquor licenses. And the conflict was that the ABCC can't regulate private events on public property. And so we wrote this to have our own version of what we thought protected our community. Because we have now patent estate that can have private parties. That's the whole idea of being able to have catered events there. So when we wrote this thing, we combined both things into one document. We overlooked the fact that a event open to the public on private property or public property should be the same. We shouldn't sort of supersede the requirements of that, if as long as it's a public event. Public event is already regulated by only beer and wine, and there's certain things that they have to do. So what we're looking to do today is to modify our policy for public events on public events on public property. And so Joe redlined it. I don't think it's totally correct in how he redlined it. I think he was getting there, but I think, I don't know if you want to pull it up, but it's page 41 of the packet.
It also includes the edits for multi-licenses within a year?
Correct, that was the second part of it. Yeah, it was doing a seasonal license for repetitive events like we have at the patent for concert series. So Joe recommended, if I read here, so Joe said, so the idea is that there's sort of three sorts of events that there's three type of events that we can issue a one-day liquor license for as the liquor board in Hamilton. One is the difficult one, right? The private event on public property.
Right.
Two is the public event on public property, and the other one is public event on private property.
Yeah.
Private events on private property do not need any sort of requirement.
Right.
Okay, so Joe changed Joe changed A to say for any, he added the word private event held on public property, but not limited to the patent homestead, because right now we wanted to have sort of
Right, a little bit of wiggle.
some flexibility, right? And so we say very clearly, 12C licensed cater or bartender service must be contracted to serve alcohol at the event, which we agree with, at that private event. But then when he goes further down,
On the top of the next page there, you're talking
top of the
about.
page, he
Copy of the 12C license, right?
So, not to be that girl, but I will.
For it.
So looking at other policies from other towns, ours is exceedingly complex relative to what other towns are doing. And it seems like we're taking what is already a complex document and trying to amend it instead of maybe starting fresh and putting together something that's a little bit simpler, but also includes all of the use cases that we need. And so I just wonder if there's an appetite to take a step back and review this policy again based on the
Yeah,
things that we need to add to
Just to
it.
jump in, because I'm sort of in agreement with Caroline, because I was actually doing a little digging in some town policies as well around this. And it seems like there's a couple things that kind of struck me. One is the separation of private events on public property versus public events. In most policies I saw, they were just the same requirements, and they weren't separated between the two. And then the second piece was around the 12C catering license, which seemed a little bit of a heavy requirement to kind of, and I know in one of the requirements, it's just more recommended rather than required, but 12C catering license isn't necessarily required for these one-day licenses, and it seems like there's a long process to get those. I think it's like a 4 to 6 week approval process through the state. There's courses involved, I think, with that. So it's a little bit of a heavier lift as opposed to just like a bartender training. So it seemed, I was just curious why we went with that particular requirement for these types of events.
Yeah, so we did what you said, right? So about a year ago, we rewrote this whole thing, right? And then it was sort of the idea, instead of having two different permits and applications, we want to simplify it and make it one application and one document. Because the ABCC is very clear on what you need to have for a public event. They do not, we had many conferences at ABCC, we looked at many other town policies, and there's not a lot of towns that actually have what we have. They don't have the patent state, they're trying to do private events. We felt, after much debate, and I probably was on your side of the fence when the debate started, but after listening to the debate, I really think that if someone's gonna have a private event, a wedding, a birthday party, a reunion, and they're just gonna serve alcohol, having a tips license was not enough for us to feel comfortable with. They're gonna do, it could be an open bar, the alcohol could just be sitting on a countertop, and it's on town-owned property. So we felt if you're gonna have a private event that's not gonna have the public purview on it, that if you're gonna have an event, you're gonna have a party, you're gonna hire a caterer, do it the right way, don't do it yourself by just going to, BJ's Wholesale Club and buying a bunch of wine, put it on the table. So if you wanna have an event on a town-owned property, and you wanna serve alcohol, you're gonna have to do it a little bit, you're gonna have to err on the side of caution. So that's where we came to in terms of protecting the town, protecting town property, protecting the citizens of the town. So do I agree with you that this seems cumbersome? It does, because we combine two things into one document. If you separated one, you have two one-page documents. We combine them together, so now we have sort of one three-page document. I didn't want people to go to two different places to figure out which permit they had to fill out. I wanted it to be one document. So I'm not against rewriting it to make it simpler, but I'm not necessarily in favor of removing the 12C requirement for private events on public property.
If I could just jump in quickly, I would like to reiterate the idea of looking at the document again, because the way that it's written, it's prohibitively expensive for small parties, and they're not booking. So if you do want to use the Patton Homestead for private events, the language it would be in the town's interest to have the language reworked.
And Holly, did you have any kind of specific suggestions or just generally?
I feel like there's a larger conversation that could be had here without getting anecdotal.
Yeah.
But it's just unfortunate that, the Patton Homestead interior space can house 49 people. And generally those groups don't want to spend a lot of money. So when you start to add on the cost of the liquor license and the cost of the tip certified professional and the cost of the COI and all of those things, they tend to look elsewhere. So.
And I guess, Holly, when's our next meeting for the Patton Study Group?
So next Tuesday.
So this might be something that we talk about a little bit during that meeting.
Sure.
And I can bring back some things to the select board.
That'd be terrific. Thank you.
Yeah, it does feel like, having a beer garden downtown for the annual party is a very different instance than somebody having a 49-person wedding at the Patton Homestead. And I hear and agree with the idea that we don't want people drunkenly running amok on public property, but a catering license is a huge burden for someone who's putting together a small wedding. And if that is what the Patton Homestead needs to book, I agree with you. I don't want 9 policies for 9 different use cases, but it seems like maybe in the pursuit of having something that meets all needs in one, it's sort of excluding the nuance of why people would want a liquor license in these 3 different scenarios.
Yeah, it's almost like you could still have it in the same policy, but have, a participant limit. So, 0 to 50 participants, meets, you have certain requirements. And if it's over a certain number, say over 50, over 100, then you might have the 12C requirement of catering if it reaches a certain threshold. That way it kind of protects the smaller gatherings from, incurring that hefty cost.
Right. Plus, also last meeting, we talked about reviewing our cost. Last meeting or meeting before, I can't remember which, is where we didn't realize it, but we're prohibitively high compared to a lot of other communities. I think
we're at 100, I think.
When the vendor was here, he was saying it was like 25 or 30 bucks for most of the communities that he applies for, and we're at 100.
100, yeah.
So,
which I agree, we thought. So yeah, there's 3 things we wanted to review, right? Was the private events on public property, the fee, and then the seasonal license.
right.
Reading the policy, I think the only thing that's restricted, but it does say, it would be good to have the region, but it does say a 12C license or a bartender service must be contract. Once again, I don't know what the cost of so it'd be good to know what what we're talking about for an investment, but
I think
it's a good insurance policy,
Yeah,
so.
bartender services vary. I think lower on the totem pole is like about $300 or so. It goes on up to 1,000 or more, depending on.
Is there a requirement for law enforcement to be on site?
Not a requirement, but it's, they're aware of it, and they can.
Anytime we do a one-day license, they're informed.
They're informed, okay.
Yeah, I've been instructed to ask for police detail at any time there's liquor included, whether it's public or private. Yeah.
I think it's just, especially Patton Homestead, that the road there and the nature of it, if you're gonna have a lot of people coming in and out of that, it'd be wise to have some kind of detail.
But yes, our challenge was there wasn't a lot of towns that have it. I think I found one, I could send it to you, one that was, I think maybe on the Cape, that had a public venue, a publicly owned venue for private parties, that we sort of modeled after this one. But that's really the only thing. Everything else is really follows the ABCC almost identical. The insurance was something you have to have insurance, you gotta have a sketch, the hours are limited, you have to have tips training, you have to purchase it from where ABCC requires it if it's a public event. Nonprofit at certain things, type of alcohol is governed by ABCC. So I mean, everything here is really just follows the ABCC other than the 12-SEER bartender service or a private event. So why don't you take that up with them and find out if there's another way to look at it?
Yeah, and I guess
Go
maybe,
that level.
since we're kind of getting it, I feel, to the end of the discussion for tonight, that maybe our new members, do a little kind of homework and investigating and bring up some fresh ideas for us. And then also kind of in the meantime, we can look into what other communities are charging for a one-day license. And, Bill, you can circulate the information from the other town that you found that has a similar venue like the Patton Homestead, but different. Like, I don't know if, as far as like Stevens Estate, North Andover, if they have any kind of policy for their.
So this is Paul from S kind of Brewing. I would highly recommend you look at like something like Appleton Farm in Ipswich. They've got a really nice program there. I think that'd be a good one to model after. It's certainly one to look at.
Okay.
Good to know.
Thanks for the input.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other discussion items? Tom, anything from you?
No, I just had like a couple of little grammatical things, but I can modify those when I'm digging into it a little bit further.
All right.
Joe has the Word version of this, so I would email him for the Word version.
So the,
Great, thanks.
And it doesn't look like the whole policy is in our packet. It's just the first 3
you mean
pages.
it's longer?
Yeah, it's longer.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And then the stuff about the seasonal or repeat event, I wonder, and maybe the gentleman that was from a brewery,
Paul, yeah.
it assumes that you know in advance that you're going to need a license multiple times. It doesn't really take into account the person who like has an event that's successful and then they come back to do it again. Is there a
Oh, so you're saying like with Paul, we know he's doing a series of events, but if someone came and said, oh, we're trying this Saturday, and if it works good, we'd like to come back again.
Yeah, like over the course of a year, if you did something 3 or 4 times, would there be like a diminishing rate over time, or do they continue to pay the fee, or is there a certain number of, again, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but it sort of seems like, go ahead, Paul.
For Appleton, we'll do typically, so we're there every Sunday, and we do 10 licenses, it's $30 an event, and we go in and we pay $300, and we're scheduled. I think with Holly, and I'll allow her to speak, I think we were doing 6 events to try it. And so we've paid the $100 for the first one on April 28th. I think tonight was discussion around the May 5th event and May 12th, so it was Thursdays. So essentially we'd be coming back every meeting,
right,
paying $100 for these 6 events, versus saying, okay, you've had a successful event, we understand who your company is and it's been successful, maybe we pay those fees in advance and you have 6 events. Or just trying to alleviate some of the administrative elements of it.
And what about, I'm sorry for my ignorance, is it the process that's painful or the money? Like if you just said that no matter what in a calendar year, no one would ever pay more than $300.
Yeah, I think so. Right. And so I would say that I think the initiation is important, right? Because you have to understand who the company is, what is the partnership in the event. And then obviously I think having a successful event is important to understand how you move forward. So I think a couple checkpoints are important. I don't think you would open up for a full season. Holly's put together 6 events. So we have, music lined up, food lined up, and then we would be offering the craft beer with the COI, with the tip certification. Ideally, we would pay for that and have those 6 events versus coming every time there's a meeting. So I think it's a bit administrative, as well as that would be $600. PBD's $25 an event, Ipswich is $30 an event. So I think it's a little bit financial and it's a little bit administrative.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our idea was that we want it to be a seasonal and repetitive event because we know what the parameters are. Parameters aren't going to change, so there's no risk because the parameters, it's the same place, same time, same day of the week, same event, right? So the parameters, then if we see them 3 times, we see them once before the event, then we see them once after the first event, and then we want to make any corrections, then we see them once after the second event, and we say, okay, so if now we see them 3 times, we say, okay, you've proven that you're working with us as a partner, and you pay that last $300, and now you can get a seasonal permit up to 8.
Got it.
Up to 8 events. So I still think it's that $300, but you pay 102, and then once you pay the third $300, then you get sort of five freebies, right?
Okay.
Paul, when you do the Appleton events, you're doing multiple events there, and you're filing kind of a one-day licenses, or are you doing a seasonal with Ipswich?
One day, but it's kind of interesting, right? So we go into the town and we purchase all the licenses right then.
So you
and we do it through the clerk.
One-days
There's no hearing or anything. So.
And so you pretty much, you go in and you say, I need 6 one-day licenses for these dates. You pay the fee, and then you walk out the door, and then you do your events.
Exactly, yeah. No, it's a sanctioned event through Appleton. So, Rob from Appleton says, hey, Essex County Brewing, you're doing all these Sunday events. They're going to be from 12 to 6. And so then we go into the town hall and have that discussion. So it's kind of triangulated, if you will. And so it's not in perpetuity for the whole season that we're going to be at Appleton's, but they are scheduled similar to what Holly's doing. So we have
Gotcha.
6 events. I think on top of that, what we've tried to do is, so with Holly and similar to Appleton, is we take 10% of our profits and we give them back to the cause. So the idea is that it is a community that we believe in, we want to get back to, there's a mission. And so when you come back to the actual fees relative to these events, we're trying to, ideally it'd be great to minimize them so that we can then contribute back to the mission of Patton Homestead or Appleton Farms is what we're trying to do.
I'm curious as how the Ipswich selectmen do their approvals, and if he's pulling in.
I'm reading it right now.
If he's coming in pulling, 5 or 6
They
days at the same
review
time.
it. They do vote for it at their meetings, but they may not ask the person to come in and.
Right, they just say, we've got, it's like our cemetery plot, almost. It's on the
agenda.
On the consent or on the agenda.
So they
I
do.
almost wonder if there's an opportunity to sort of vet vendors as they come through. And as we've already been working with Paul and Essex County Brewing Company, and we know that they've done a great job and they're very supportive, maybe the first round they come to the select board meeting, and then, for future events, perhaps they don't need to be in attendance or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's important that they come in, at least the first time, so we can, talk to them a little bit. But I don't know if it's.
This is Ipswich. This is for town property. Only 1 drink per person may be served on town property. That's their regulation.
So 1 drink per person on
That's
town
it.
property.
But
Yeah, for
Appleton's
private events.
Appleton's not
No,
town.
exactly. This is
property,
in terms of if it was
In terms of if Appleton was a public
So in
space.
terms of like if Patton was
Right.
if Patton was in Ipswich.
Right.
But that's
Right,
interesting.
Patton Park, yeah, yep.
So just out of curiosity, because I'm an Ipswich resident and I've been to events in Ipswich where alcohol is served, and that's certainly not regulated. So I'm just curious if there's any more language in there.
No, it's weird.
It just says one drink maximum.
I just downloaded off their site. Only 1 drink per person may be served on town property, and drinks must be under 8 ounces and must be in plastic cups.
That's not the case.
Holly, you're saying they're breaking their own rules.
But that's
Yeah,
why
that's
I'm
normal.
that's why I'm in favor of having a bartender or a 12C license when it's not in the public purview, and people don't know what's going on behind closed doors, so on town property. So, but we'll continue to talk about it. I think the important thing tonight is that we have to get, we have to
An
review.
approval for the next one, yeah.
Approve 5.5 and 5.12 for Paul.
All right, so let's kind of move on to that one then, and everyone's kind of got their homework for next time with the one-day policy. So up next, we have approve one-day liquor license request for Patton Homestead Events Series, so discussion and vote, and we've already kind of started to talk about it. We have got Paul here tonight and Holly, and it's just kind of a continuation of our discussion last time, and the application is in our packets.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the one-day license for 5.5 and 5.12 for Patton Concert Series by Essex County Brewing.
Second.
All right, second by Jamie. Discussion on this one?
So we have to sort of, last time we voted to sort of, looking for the word, but we had to sort of make an exception to
our policy,
our
right?
policy. So I think, so I'll amend the motion. I amend the motion to vote, I make a motion to make a exception to our policy to, while it's in review, to approve a one-day liquor license for Essex County Brewing on 5.5 and 5.12 at Patton Homestead for the Patton Homestead Concert Series.
Second.
All right, second by Jamie. Further discussion?
And and so we're clear for our new members, right? So the exception is the 12C license not being required.
Correct.
Primarily.
Correct.
And we're approving 2 days in one?
And because we did it last weekend, it's open to the public, it's a public event. And it is by all the ABCC requirements. So the intent though is that I would like to, I'm willing to make the exception. I just think the intent is I'd like to clean up our bylaw within the next 1 or 2 meetings so that we aren't.
Yeah, I agree.
so
We don't want to
make
be
it-
too far in
We want our
arrears here.
vendors to be clear what they're coming for us and not be, we want Patton and Homestead to be able to schedule events without confusing vendors on what they're actually applying for. So, so I think it's good that we're keeping the events going, but we should clean this up pretty quickly.
So sorry if I'm confused, but so they don't have a 12C license, you said that's the exception here, which would be the case for most brewery trucks? Which would mean that our current policy would require an exception anytime a brewing truck wanted to be in an event?
Correct, which is why the policy was, when we wrote the policy, we missed the word private event on public property.
But it seems to me that whether it was private or public, the 12C inclusion in the policy is always going to be a problem for breweries with mobile beer trucks, because they're never going to have a 12C.
Any vineyard or beer company or who come and serve wine or beer, and that's all they serve from the company, yes, will typically not have a 12C license. That's correct, yeah.
So they would not be able to get a liquor license under our current policy, a one-day liquor license?
For events on Patton Homestead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Which is why we want to amend the policy, and then we have to decide how we're going to deal with private events.
Right.
And I guess I could ask, Paul, so let's deal with this first, and then we can ask Paul a question, but.
All right.
We have a motion on the floor.
We got a motion, a second. We've kind of done our discussion, so all those in favor say aye. We'll start with Bill for roll call.
William Olson, aye.
Jamie?
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Carolyn Beaulieu, aye.
And Tom remotely?
Tom Myers, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye.
So, Paul, let me ask you a question, just as a representative vendor, but how many private events versus public events do you do a year? Like, what's the percentage of public versus private?
Honestly, it's 90% public. The 10% that we do are actually in our tap room. So it's obviously within our, lease premise. But the majority are with Appleton Farms, Stevens Coolidge, certificate of insurance, tip certification, police detail when required, boundaries, things like that, so. And that's a routine concert series in Peabody. Appleton is every Sunday. We do everything from hoedowns in Tewksbury to Stevens Coolidge in North Andover. Typically, they have music and food trucks associated with those as well.
And Paul, you back in front of us anytime in the near future?
So it would be after the next two events. So we've paid the $100 for the 428 event. The 512 is, on the docket tonight, and then we would be back for the following event after that. So every targeted, there's 6 planned right now. So
Yes, we do want to address we don't have to have them write another check, so we do want to address it if we can next week. Because the idea is a $300 cap for the seasonal.
Right.
So if we get that approved before the next time we vote, he's paid
for the season.
his last dollar for the season. Or we could change it to $50 and, whatever, but.
Right.
But still, it's a $300 cap, so. Okay. So Paul, you are all set, and I think Sean will have his patent meeting in the next week, you said?
Yeah, Tuesday.
And then we'll do our research, and we can communicate via email. We just can't debate over. So you can share files, but we can't debate, so, and you can't copy everybody, so typically send it to Joe. Joe sends it out to everybody, and then you can review it and comment back to Joe.
is it possible to get in the legislation that it's required that the craft beer vendor needs to be a Hamilton Wyndham Regional alumni?
We could try that, Paul.
I mean, just an asterisk or something. Yeah.
It'll just be special pricing for you.
It'll be more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cost.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Holly, for joining us
See you
tonight.
again, thank you.
See ya.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, up next we have a report on plans for outdoor summer seating at 15 Walnut discussion. And in your packet, they're looking at continuing their use of their outdoor space with their 2 parking spaces, I think, are taken over from it, if I remember right.
Correct. So who's here tonight to present this? Anybody?
Do we have anybody from 15 Walnut here tonight online? Doesn't seem like it. If you are,
Hi, yes. This is Miranda Sweet. I'm the general manager over at 15 Walnut.
Miranda?
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. If you could just kind of go over with us, I'm assuming this is kind of a continuation of what you've been doing, but just kind of for the general public that might not realize it, tell us what you've got outside and what you wish to continue to do.
Okay, so you are correct. We're just looking to continue with the same parameters for our outdoor patio as we have done in the last 2 years. And you are correct in that it is just taking up 2 parking spaces in addition to, the underneath the awning that we use to also house outdoor seating as well.
So the only question I had was the seating capacity. So who regulates the numbers of your liquor license?
So I am under the assumption that these numbers, because they were given over the last 2 years, that they are under the parameters of our liquor license. We're not looking to expand more than what we've done the previous 2 seasons.
Yeah, but last
I think
year you had less tables inside. I just want to make sure we're not. I'm in favor of the outdoor seating. I just want to make sure somebody we're going to allow you to have too many seats in your restaurant.
Right. To Bill's question, Miranda, I think our approval obviously was due to COVID and regulations for indoor seating, so we allowed the outdoor seating. But now that you're back at capacity inside, that's going to change your number of overall capacity and your capacity for alcohol.
Okay. Well, I mean, what we typically shut down a section of the restaurant for staffing reasons, because we aren't able to, with the patio, able to seat the inside completely. So, that is a loss of about 18 seats inside. But yes, the outdoor seating is, I would say, is probably about 32 seats.
Yeah, in the application you have the 15 Walnut Kitchen and Tavern requests the addition of 40 outdoor seats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that we actually, I know they requested that, but we didn't typically use it. At least me coming into, I came into the location from a previous other Serenity restaurant back in September with outdoor seating going on. And there were a few tables that were in the proposal that we actually didn't utilize. So it was closer to the 32 seats that I just mentioned.
Gotcha. And just to kind of reiterate what you said earlier, that when you have your outdoor space open, which hopefully when the weather's nice, people will be out there more, that you're kind of limiting your indoor capacity due to staffing. So if you have, say, 4 wait staff on, you would have to only have 3 inside and 1 outside, and that would limit the capacity inside, correct?
That's correct. Absolutely.
Do we know the total, what the current liquor license capacity is versus the number of seats you have at the bar and tables? I'm just trying to do the math. If you lose 18 seats, but you can seat 36 outside on the map, that's still a breach of...
Yeah, I mean, that was once again, my question is not to say no to this. My question is to make sure we don't put you in a bad situation.
Okay.
My question to you is that I just want to make sure that when we approve this, there's nothing in this that says that if your existing liquor license is based on quantity of seats. So in the Charlie Baker April 1st, 2022, he also doesn't talk about an increased number of seats. So I just trying to understand that. I'm willing to pass it as long as we make a caveat that they can't extend the number.
It's got to be overall capacity, I think, right?
They can't increase the overall capacity.
Okay.
The current liquor license is approved, and I don't have that information here to be able to do the math.
Right, I think what we're kind of getting at saying is, let's just say a round number, your capacity is 100 people, for sake of argument, inside the building, and you've added these, let's say, 40 seats outside, that your inside capacity would then decrease to 60, and you'd have the 40 outside. I don't think we would like to have kind of additional capacity on there. It would be 140. Unless it's already approved.
Built into your liquor license.
Yeah, right, unless it's already built into the liquor license.
Okay, understood.
So I make a motion that we need to have further discussion, but still the motion down. I make a motion that we approve let's go to the application, the temporary public way property license for outdoor seating for Indigo Restaurant Corp., DBA 15 Walnut Tavern at 50 Walnut Hamlet, with the caveat that they do not increase the number of seats per their existing
beyond their ABC
liquor license requirements.
Do I have a second from anyone?
Second.
Second from Jamie. Further discussion.
I would just like to follow up with some sort of letter that says if their current liquor license is tied to a seat quantity, then we just want to know what that is.
And then,
just so we're doing our job.
And Miranda, this, with the governor's orders and stuff, basically this application and pending approval would be good into April 1st, 2023. Do you think that you would be looking to extend it past that deadline, if possible? And I'm kind of future casting.
Yes, yeah. I would assume yes. That we would be looking to do that, every year for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that would have to take a change in our bylaws. I think
Okay.
it's happening now because the governor's letting it happen due to COVID. but we would have to look at our local bylaws to change it, because at the moment, we don't have anything for outdoor capacity.
So we should start looking at a policy.
Yeah, so what my recommendation would be to you, Miranda, you and the restaurant group, would be to look at some other towns that do allow for outdoor seating, in
Okay.
non-COVID times. And then I would charge you to bring something forward to the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, I stand corrected, in this next year here, so that you'll kind of be ahead of the game, so, we can work together to get that goal.
Okay, absolutely.
Any other discussion? Tom, do you have anything to weigh in on?
Nope, nothing for me. Thanks.
Anything else from you, Bill or Jamie?
Not for me.
Caroline?
Nothing.
All right. Should I move to the vote?
Sure.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
William Olson, aye.
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Caroline Beaulieu, aye.
Tom?
Tom Myers, aye.
Sean Farrell, aye. Motion passes.
So if you can come back to us within the next couple weeks with that letter confirming if your license is tied to a quantity of seats and how you will address that's the only caveat on the approval.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda. All right, up next, we have Hamilton third-party flag policy review and discussion. So in your packets, we have our current draft of flag policy. And at the moment, our kind of temporary or semi-permanent policy is only flags approved with state and federal proclamations, et cetera.
Well, that's, right, that's the draft.
Right.
It's not actually.
Right.
the
Our
current
policy right now,
policy.
our policy right now is that the select board is the governing body which
Right.
votes or doesn't vote. And so, yeah, so there's currently no policy that we're just sort of.
Currently, so our policy is no
An application
policy.
process, no
Right.
policy. So we had looked at this months and months ago, and looked at a couple different options of how to approve flags that people want to fly with, either sort of an application process, a petition, or something if it wasn't if it wasn't brought by a town or a board. And then I think we ended up on basically saying, simplify and say, if it's not a federal, state or federal proclamation or a recognized holiday, then we wouldn't look at those flags. And then there was a Supreme Court case pending, so we tabled everything.
Right.
Like the day before we were gonna vote on this thing.
Right.
But now we're to June again, and we do not want to be in a situation where we can't support our state and federal proclamated holidays. So that's why we put on the agenda to sort of address it before we got requests. So we do not need a policy to vote on things. We just need to agree and vote on, and get a majority of the vote to allow it. But it would be good to have a policy, so once again, our citizens are very clear on what the town policies are for flying a flag on public property.
So, and I guess I would say that I think we should step back a little bit from the policy development, not to necessarily not have a policy, but I do think I do think we should essentially have, I mean, sort of like with, some of the exceptions to liquor license or whatever, like, and it, and this is from the Supreme Court, right? Government speech, and so we should be the ones making the government speech. And so not only does our policy, which it already does, kind of say, it's government speech, we make the decisions, but we also need to kind of act consistent with that and not overstep by I guess, inviting and having an application process. I'm not announcing my final decision on that, but I guess for now, I'd say we should go back, write a different policy, in my view, that more emphasizes that it's the government that initiates the speech. People write to us all the time as select board members. They can make requests, they can complain, they can say, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, but to have a formal application policy gets us sort of closer in the direction of the city of Boston, which, well, actually, they didn't really have, but anyway, gets us closer towards a situation where we're opening up to a public forum or limited public forum, which, I mean, we can have a debate about whether we should do that, but I think we're all pretty much agreed, and town council's certainly clear on that it should be government speech, and we need to make sure that we abide by that.
Right.
So I am willing to be the one that tries to come up with a new policy that encapsulates that.
So you are in favor of going back to sort of interpret it, so I understand it, having more of a free, anybody can come to us with an application, and we have to review it, or, that's what I was trying to figure out, the interpretation of who can come and ask, who can come and what they can put on an application in terms of a flag.
So I wonder if it's not necessarily a policy so much as a statement of consideration. Like, anybody can ask us to fly any flag, right? There's nothing stopping people from asking us to fly a flag. But I think the question here is that government speech, we are the arbiters of government speech in this town, right? We are the ones who are elected to decide what's government speech, and as such, I feel like a policy is a really tough thing because there's a lot of nuance that isn't going to be captured by a policy. What we can say is there are considerations by which we decide, and those are, precedent, alignment to the town values, adherence to federal and state law, consideration of state and federal proclamations and holidays that go into the decision-making, but it is a discretionary act at the end of the day by the elected officials in a town what government speech is. And that may change based on who the government officials are year over year. There may be different government officials a year from now that feel differently, and they can bring that. But I think a policy is a dangerous path at this point. And I'm not saying that's my final feeling, but I wonder if any policy at all isn't going to capture the nuance of the conversation that we're having. That a case
I'd also just add to that, just because I agree with what Caroline's saying, and I'd be interested to see what the Supreme Court is going to say on this, because if you look at the case with the city of Boston, and if you listen to the arguments at SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, they kind of inferred that there's a way to do this, that the way they were leaning, some of the questions they were asking implied that there's a way to do this that is the right way, so to speak, and that they might be leaning against the way the city of Boston kind of put this policy out there. So I think we can expect a decision from what I've heard, later this spring. We might want to hold off on where we are and see what that decision is, because it might give us a little bit of guidance on how we might craft a policy in the future if that's the route we want to go. I think that's worth holding off, at least for now.
Do not use chat, raise your hand. And folks, sorry, the chat is closed. If you want to say a comment, we will recognize you if you raise your hand, but the chat should not be used. That's our...
Jamie, you were still saying something.
Yeah, well, I was going to respond sort of directly to Bill's question. All I was saying is that for now, right, there's no here is your channel to ask for a flag raising. That doesn't stop people from asking. But ultimately, it's us, and I think we should still certainly bring these decisions that we make as the government to the open forum. The public should be able to comment, that's for sure.
Right. But I think that, my opinion is that, and that's what was the term you used, not to do a policy, but to do you said something. Considerations. I think that's a policy consideration. To me, that's semantics. If you're going to issue something,
rules and regs.
If you're going to issue something, whether you want to call it policy or consideration, it's sort of. But the whole reason that we spent time on this is because I did think it was important to not put it in just our hands of the select board, because we don't know who the select board will be later. We don't know, who they'll be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And so we're trying to set parameters where the select board is approving that you're conforming to a policy, not necessarily that they're not conforming that they agree with the politics or the right of the flag. It's more that you conforming to the policy. And so what we put in here as a sort of guide rails, if we're gonna open, so there were two ways to look at it. One is just, hey, it's not a state or federal holiday or proclamation, not even considered, right? Or if you were gonna consider anything, then we said, okay, let's get 25 signatures of registered voters, so it shows that it's a town, they're building consensus in the town, this is an important flag to fly in town, and we should consider it seriously, because not just one person coming with, hey, I want a flag of a frog to be on Patton Park for 7 days, because I like frogs. It has to be like consensus. So I think it was important that it did not just come down to us, it was more of, of either being a state consensus, federal consensus, or local consensus by having sort of the 25 signatures. So that was my compromise to making a policy that because I think it's important to take it out of our hands of us being the ones that say yes or no, and being more of a community thing. And we're the ones to just regulate whether it falls within our policy, not whether we agree with it or not.
So, I think that's all, that sounds reasonable, except to the extent that, it makes it really does rest with us as the government. And so, and again, I'm not saying that we wouldn't develop a short policy, possibly, but I think we need to be careful to actually own the decision as the body that makes the decision of doing it, rather than saying, okay, well, public, you fit into this, you have an almost, you have a de facto seeming right to have the flag. Mm-hmm. And, and some of it is like, and frankly, well, some of the requests, seem to be ones that are more like trying to prove a point than actually trying to fly flags that are, that I think reflect our community values. And so, but there've been lots of proclamations by lots of people. So the word proclamation, I know, and we've wrestled with that a little bit, but maybe not as much as we should. That the word proclamation could open it up to a bunch of things, including some things where we get, frivolous requests or things like that. So,
are you talking about a policy for whether it's even considered, or a policy that determines whether it flies? Because I think those are two very different things. Like, I can agree that there are stage gates by which we can say, like, if it's a hand-drawn picture of a frog, it's not, it's a waste of everyone's time to even consider it. Now, so if we want to put stage gates to that, I think my concern is similar to yours, Jamie, which is that if you have a policy by which, if you meet all these things, carte blanche, you can fly it. It's these, I don't know if you've looked at the list of proclamations for state and federal governments, like, there's a lot of gray area in there. And I worry that to say that doesn't allow, I think it gets into that area of people, not truly understanding the nuance of it being government speech on our flagpole in town.
Yeah, I think we're kind of toying around with this idea of public forum versus the government speech, and I think we have to be pretty solid in where we land, at least from what I'm reading on some of the City of Boston case. We have to be pretty firm that it's government speech, and government speech doesn't necessarily mean just because the board of the select board approved it doesn't just necessarily automatically designate it as government speech. It has to be essentially a government approved message that we're sending. So I think wherever we land, and I'm not necessarily against, doing a policy, but I think wherever we land on the policy, we have to make sure that, this is, government speech that's not subject to public forums. That way we have control over it, and it's a message that the government is comfortable sending, the select board as the messenger of the government. So I think that's where looks like the city of Boston case is going to land is whether it's a public forum and, which is, open to free speech and very limited restrictions versus, government speech where we have that control over it. So I think wherever this policy lands, we just have to make sure that, tying it to a government or a state proclamation is one step in the process, I think. But like everyone's alluded to, there's a number of proclamations that we might not want to, raise a flag on. I know there's a policy or a proclamation on like, a state-sponsored snowboarding day. And not that we're against snowboarding, but is that a message that the government wants to send? I think we need to have some sort of criteria that, yes, it's tied to a proclamation, but also it's an endorsed message or just some language to that effect to show that it's a government speech versus that public forum. I think that's where we're going to possibly get into trouble.
Yeah, I guess for me, I kind of, I'm leaning towards if it flies at the White House or the State House, it's okay. And maybe it's kind of going to sound weird, but maybe we move away from flags. So an example would be last year, the year before, for Pride Month, the town of Wenham and other towns may not have flown a flag, but they lit up Town Hall with rainbow lights. So maybe there's some other mechanism. Maybe, we don't fly the Juneteenth flag, but we have a Juneteenth celebration or some, we kind of think a little bit outside the box to get outside the controversy and all the stuff with flying multiple flags for multiple different things, because, as we start flying things, we're going to get more and more requests that are going to be counter each other, I feel. You'll have, opposing kind of sanctions within the town trying to each fly their flag at the same time, or 1 month one thing, 1 month the other thing that's not in agreement with the holistic community.
Yeah, and that's
And
right.
that's the sticky,
Yeah. And that's
right.
right, that's my, because we've been debating this for months, right? And
Yeah.
I lay in the same thing of, do I like flying certain flags? Absolutely. But is it worth the risk that we take by having a policy that's too open, that we debate
Right.
for too long?
Right,
We
and
should be doing other things in town.
Exactly.
And that we're also dealing with a Supreme Court case that's not decided yet.
Right, and then I think,
So that's where I come down to, we're debating something that we really don't have a legal precedent to debate until.
right,
So it's we either have to keep it really simple or not do it at all.
Right.
Until we,
right, and I think the other option, I think I mentioned, it's been a year or so, that we have another flagpole erected in Patton Park or somewhere, and that is more of the, for lack of a better word, kind of the free speech pole instead of government sanctioned pole, because it wouldn't be our town flagpole in front of Town Hall.
So that's problematic because it really gets us
Right,
almost
that-
exactly where the city of Boston is.
Exactly, it gets into more of a kind of.
Then it's open for anything
tack.
to be up there. I mean, that's a public forum, and then you could put any flag that you wanted up there.
Right,
Anyone could.
right, it opens up a whole can of worms.
We got an audience member,
And someone,
Virginia.
hi Virginia, did you want to say something?
I would like to, if I may.
Please, Virginia.
I'm Virginia Cookson from 318 Boris Street. I listened to this very, problematic situation last year, and I listened to it from your other larger communities and smaller communities, and I think the government should flag government flags, U.S., state, county, town, because you can upset people because not recognition of perhaps a group, or it could be that something might be political that might not be appropriate because it's political, or it represents some type of organization that's unusual, whatever. I think that the town flagpole should be for the town, and I agree with our new chairman that perhaps what we could look at is erecting another pole, perhaps even in Patton Park, since they're going to be putting a lot of money into that park soon. Maybe it would be appropriate to have a public pole fair, you can put up flags for weddings or anything you want. Even maybe the frog, but town flagpole should be for the government, and you won't have any of this controversy about it if we just decided that, and with the option, of course, of perhaps another pole. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Virginia. Anybody else?
So.
Tosh Blake here. Hello?
Hi, Tosh, go ahead.
Oh, hey, I don't. Yeah, interesting discussion. Yes, and the two, congratulations to the two new board members. We have a new board. It's good to know. I've been, of course, as you all know, been talking about this for a while. I think there's some interesting stuff being raised, especially with the pending Supreme Court case. I guess so far we do have an ad hoc kind of sort of, it's not a policy per se, but just an ad hoc way of picking flags. That works for now technically, I guess, according to the court rulings. And excuse me, I have a cold, so my voice is a little off. But I guess one thing, and I think Mr. Fowle, Mr. Olson have kind of alluded to is some of the controversies that could arise if you were kind of piecemeal picking this flag or that flag if you were to do it on an individual case-by-case basis. And one of the pitfalls is, of course, the perception, at least, of maybe if it turns out if certain flags get picked and not others, political favoritism or things like that. So I think we want government to at least represent all of the town. I think a board member, Bolio, she kind of, I never heard this from other people, if you put up a certain flag that represents who we are as a community. But that's sort of going beyond what government speech is. Government speech is one level, saying who we are as a community, as if it represents the whole town, maybe pushing things. And it may look like political triumphalism. Maybe 1/3 of the town, maybe 2/3 of the town likes the flag that goes up, and 1/3 of the town doesn't like it. So it wouldn't really represent the community. You just have sort of the majority saying, well, this is who we are, and I don't care if you don't like it. I don't think that's a very good message for government to give to, people who might be in the minority. Certainly if you had a majority of somehow, in this town out there, that would be likely, but had a Confederate flag and say, hey, we have the majority on the board that wants a Confederate flag to put out because we think it's part of American history, that would offend a lot of people, quite rightly, and they would want, like, why are we putting some kind of flag we don't want to see claiming it's representing our town? So I think there is a choice. It looks like with the Boston case, I mean, depending on if Boston loses, then it looks like Boston will have a choice. They can either let all the flags go up or decide not to have any flags. Otherwise it'll be the same pickle where they're going to have to pick and choose and look like they're discriminating. So my vote is either way. I mean, I'm open-minded where you could either stick to like the previous caller said, American flag, state flag, and if there's a town flag, go for that. Keep it real simple. And those flags, supposedly represent all of us, or open it to, basically everybody. And that would, of course, be a lot more work and very possibly controversial, but it would be equitable. I mean, but, I think we want to try to avoid sort of, looking, what I'm guessing is look like political favoritism. So obviously it's not going to be great for our town, and is not good municipal governments in general, I would think, but that's just my opinion. But thanks,
Tosh.
Right.
I guess I kind of a side comment, since Tosh was talking about political versus whatever, and I think for some people, for myself, pride flag, Juneteenth flag seem more human rights than political, but a lot of people would beg to differ. So we've got that nuance as well with different flags. I think there's a lot of kind of politicizing of different things, so things get skewed. So there's another layer into that depending on what the flag is that's being requested.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, of course, my opinion would be that the pride flag and Juneteenth are very political, not necessarily in a bad way, but certainly to say like, the issue of transgenderism, that's controversial to some people anyway. Now, for someone to say that represents the whole town, I don't know. I beg to differ on that. But Yes, the way the flags and those flags went up, especially the pride flag, it came up in a very politically charged decision by 3 members of town who decided just to put it up without any vote or anything like that. So the way it came about was political, and almost every flag request is probably going to be somewhat political, unless it's a benign holiday or something like an awareness month or something.
Right.
But and political is not necessarily bad. My point is, it's okay to be political, but be equitable in your political. And if you're just going by, well, we have the majority, we're going to pick these flags, and I don't care about the other flags, it's not going to, in my opinion, be great for government.
All right, thanks, Tosh.
You're welcome.
Who we got? Who?
Ann Brady.
Ann, you wanted to speak?
Hi everyone. Ann Brady, Chair of the town-formed Human Rights Commission. I just want to clarify a couple of things. Government speech is really about, to my knowledge and to the knowledge of many, how the government wants to represent itself and what does the government want to say. So I think that's the decision the select board has to make as it faces these decisions going forward. Something that's been kind of blurred in the discussion here is that the requests for the Pride flag and the Juneteenth flag were not third-party requests. They came from the town commission in recognition of a federal holiday, the Juneteenth federal holiday. It is not a political request. It happens to be a federal holiday that has a flag that represents it. Pride is a nationally recognized month that exists to acknowledge the human right that people should be respected no matter what their sexual orientation. It should not also, it's not raised as a political statement. And Pride is federally, excuse me, I'm speaking. It's federally recognized as the month of June as Pride Month. So the two things to say are that raising those two flags are ways of showing that we are in keeping with the state holiday and the federal holiday of Juneteenth, and that we are a welcoming town no matter who you are, and that we are a safe place no matter who you are, and that we celebrate people no matter who they are. The requests did not come from outside of our government. We presented the case for lifting the moratorium on flying any flag other than the American flag due to the fact that it was coming up upon Pride and Juneteenth, and we felt the need to have those two flag raisings last year. We presented the case for that last May. But I want to have those two situations held separate from third-party flag requests, because I think it is a completely different situation for those two flags. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's really good to put back in the context. And I think with that, we're still kind of talking about the third-party flag policy, but I want to bring up our next agenda item and kind of fold it in. It's request to fly third-party flags on town flagpoles, and then it lists Pride flag, Juneteenth flag, which, as Ann just stated, that it really wasn't a third party with our own government, the Gadsden flag and the Right to Life flag. So review, discussion of open requests. So let's kind of fold that.
It's not a government flag, is it?
So, and I just want to.
Virginia, did you want to say something? And just, if you do, just wait a second. I want to hear from Jamie. Is that okay?
Fine.
I just want to dovetail off of what Ann had said, which I was planning to say before she said it, but we did make a decision last year, for the most part unanimously among the select board. Pride flag was flown 2 years ago, and honestly, I mean, I think, again, to Tasha's point, it's not every single person in the community. But honestly, it's been very well received, and I think, celebrated in that sense. And so now, a decision against that, it's meaningful. And to lots of people's point, Bill's point, the easiest thing would be to say, we aren't flying any other flags, stop coming to us with any flag requests. That would be the easiest job for us. But the weight of that bears pretty heavily on me about the precedent that we set in the last couple of years. And because it's a human rights issue. That doesn't mean that human rights is the only reason flags get flown, but we did make that statement, so now to make a statement contrary to that is problematic from a human rights standpoint.
Yeah, I think it also bears saying that just because something is politicized doesn't mean it is inherently political. And to the point of government speech, like, the federal government and the government of the United States of America believes in the rights of people regardless of their sexual orientation. That is the perspective of our government. And so it's not whether you personally have a belief system that varies from that. I don't really entertain the argument that that is not government speech just because you personally disagree. The United States government does, in fact, believe that. And so to Jamie's point, I think specifically in light of a lot of the conversations that we've been having intensely in our town, it does send a message if we decide not to fly those flags. And I'm not suggesting that you should make decisions based on a PR nightmare, but I think that there are many, many friends and neighbors, and specifically children in our schools, that would be adversely affected by deciding that we as a town do not think that we should fly that flag. I would not feel good. I would not sleep well at night knowing that we had made that choice.
Tom, anything from you?
Yeah, no, I agree with Caroline and Jamie, and to Caroline's point about, the importance, I think, of the message that it sends to fly bills. I think that is something, with the Juneteenth and the Pride flag, an important message to send. I think my concern is more around the policy itself and the language of that policy. And I know, just looking at, again, going back to the City of Boston case, I mean, they're in the middle of a legal battle where they're harping on every word in that policy. And so I just don't want to find ourselves, adopting a policy and then, months down the road, find ourselves in a similar litigation where we're, going through every sentence about, well, what does this mean? Why did you put this in here? I think if we had a little bit of guidance once the outcome of that case comes about, that might spell out some requirements or give a little direction on where we should go for these types of requests. I think it might be better served for our purposes to not have to kind of revisit this again in a couple of months and make tweaks.
Suggestions, Bill? I know you put this on the agenda. I don't know if you had a direction you wanted to go with it, but I know we're just kind of...
I want to talk about it because I wanted to stay ahead of June, because it was important that we don't go backwards, right? I don't want to go backwards. As Jamie says, it would be a bad message to go backwards. I wanted to go forwards, but we don't have the ability to go forwards because
we're still waiting on SCOTUS, right?
Courts take a long time. So I was trying to come up with a compromise that allows us to go forward without putting us in a bad situation.
When I guess, and we can talk about this next meeting because we still have a little bit of time, but I mean, my suggestion, and it's up to the will of the board, would be to kind of keep it status quo with what we're doing now, kind of the moratorium, but include flags we've already previously flown, and that would be the Pride flag, Juneteenth, that we've already set federal holidays and all that stuff. So it would be kind of going ahead with it's already government speech by our overall government and state government, and thus us. But then, and Jamie's kind of volunteered to work on the policy a bit, but we're still kind of waiting on Supreme Court, right?
So I mean, if you want, I mean, once again, I don't want to base it on what, but you look at it historically, we've been flying these flags for for the last 24 months. And once again, I know it was on a moratorium, but we haven't had that many requests. These are the only 2 flags we've flown, and the only other requests have come have been for the Gadsden flag and I think.
The Right to Life, I
Right to
think.
Life flag. So, I mean, we've had, like we had 100. Now, once again, we have a moratorium, which I get, but it doesn't stop people from
requesting.
From sending an email and says, when's the moratorium over? So it's not like this is, you know, some huge pressure to fly 100 flags tomorrow, but I also don't feel good about just not having something to sort of, and once again, it's guardrails. If you look at our policy that we wrote, which I think actually read, it's a pretty good policy, there's lots of outs on the guardrails, but at least gives guardrails. So it shows people we thought about it, we thought about all sides and sort of given people the ability to build consensus. And we still could say, as the elected board, still can say no to it, but at least it builds some guardrails. But once again, I'm not saying we vote on this policy. I don't think we can, but we need to figure out what we're gonna do for June.
The interim, right. So I guess as far as.
So I wanted to start the discussion sooner than later, so we didn't get to, you know, May 29th, we hadn't decided yet, so.
Right.
So I think we have another couple weeks, so I think probably we should, you guys are new to the board, it's new dialogue, it's good dialogue we've heard from the public, but we should be prepared to decide what we do by, you know, middle of May.
Sounds good to me. What do you think, Jamie?
Josh, excuse me, Josh Blake, is it okay to talk, or I don't know if you guys are
Just one
discussing?
second. Just hold on one second, Tosh.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, no, I think probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
As, the request, or whatever, it's been under consideration for a while, and I don't have any hope necessarily that the Supreme Court's going to decide in the next 2 weeks. And, you know, I know that the school committee's attorney wrote an opinion saying that, you know, that this case is very unlikely to affect things because of things I've said in previous select board meetings, that City of Boston really opened themselves up to it, and that, what we're talking about is not opening ourselves up to that, so.
All right. Tom or Caroline, any closing comments? And I'll let Tosh have the last word, I guess. No? Tosh, what do you want to say?
Oh, yeah, excuse me. Yeah, so I guess as it stands, the policy, such as it is kind of a discretion of the government or the board. But also, it's been mentioned by a couple of people, Mr. Knudsen, and I think you, that it's also a government holiday. It kind of gives legitimacy to the thing, and that's partially basing it on the fact that it's government, sort of almost pre-approved government speech from, I think, the federal level. So that being said, if it's not a political choice for these flags, it's really, well, it's, you know, like I said, it's not political necessarily, or I'd like to request for 4th of July, and you can think about this, maybe take it up next meeting. 4th of July, I'd like to officially request the Gadsden flag be flown at Town Hall. That's a government holiday. Obviously, it's a Revolutionary War flag, which would be appropriate for July 4th. I don't know what if you're going to have, you know, going to discuss that or would vote on that or how that would work, but I would like to make that request.
All right. Thank you, Tosh. All right, so I think we've all got kind of a little bit of homework to really dig deep, and Jamie, if you want to start putting something together on what we've got so far and any edits, that would be great too. All right, up next we have.
So let's just so we have closure, because once again, my hesitancy is not about flying the flag, it's about doing it in the right way for the town and feeling good about that we're setting a good example. So, but I also don't think we should write a policy right now either. So I think in the absence of a policy, we need to decide, in my opinion, in the absence of a policy, we need to decide, because we don't need a policy to do it, because right now we don't have a policy, and we can
vote however we would like.
Vote however we want to vote. So I think that the goal for us is to figure out in the absence of a policy, between now and SCOTUS comes up with a ruling. Even if it doesn't affect it, we still don't think it's worth our time to write a policy in the absence of a decision,
All right,
in my opinion.
If I'm reading into that, or reading not into it, but just what you're saying, is that we kind of have two things here. One thing is we've got some requests in front of us.
Right.
And that since we don't have a current policy, that we just decide on those requests. And the second part is that we work on some type of a policy pending or not pending Supreme Court
Right, so,
decision.
right, correct, yeah.
And then, align it at some point if the SCOTUS is going to affect us or not, align it with that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the third-party flag policy, once again, why are we calling it in the meeting minutes? Why are we calling it, we just call it a flag?
Yeah, I don't know why it says third
Yeah,
party.
so in the future, let's get rid of the third party. I don't know where that
Just
came
call
from.
it flag policy.
It's a flag policy, yeah.
Because there's no first, second,
we
third
have
policy.
in our quote-unquote draft policy, we have 4 entities that can request a flag: a nonprofit,
right,
a town board or committee, a resident. Maybe it was just 3.
I think it's just the 3.
Hold on a second here. It was a nonprofit with an affiliation to the town of Hamilton, a town-sponsored board or committee, or a resident. So those 3.
Right.
It's not really about third party. It's about that.
3 different parties,
3
not
different
third party.
All
Okay.
right. I think that was good discussion, and I think it's important discussion. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. All right, up next we have, in our last item, Select Board 2022-2023 goal setting. And this is discussion only, and for the newer members of the board, basically, every year about this time, we start talking about goals for, we'll say mainly the town manager, which would be Joe, and also us. We usually kind of have some kind of a powwow, either over the years it's been a little bit different. Sometimes we do it at our regular scheduled meeting, sometimes we schedule another meeting, sometimes we do a little bit of a retreat where we have some dinner and we talk about goals, but then it's kind of hashing them all out. And I think what I'll probably do is have Joe share his current goals with the board again, just so we're on the same page, and then talk about kind of closing up goals that are currently going on, and then any new goals that we feel fit to add to the list. And they can be kind of a lot of different things. You could go from, it could be increasing website traffic to affordable housing to town hall renovations to really anything that we think is important to the town of Hamilton and the town manager's position.
How are goals currently documented and tracked?
We currently have basically a running list that Joe has, and then the main tracking is probably selectmen check-ins, and then when we come to his review, he'll give us a kind of report on where he is with those goals.
And we did reformat his town manager report.
And that's kind of our current tracking system on.
So our town manager, they're all itemized, and he tracks them if there's been updates week to week or not. So those are sort of a living, breathing document in Google Docs, so we can see the transformation of those goals.
And so I guess the goal of these goals are twofold. One is that we're, improving the town in whichever way we see the direction is, and the other one is to review the town manager's performance.
Yep.
For example, some things that have been on the goals before was was our water plant, and that obviously we've gotten that through, and now it's, in this construction phase. Cell phone tower, once again, it's been on there for a long time, and we were like literally at the.
Is it still August?
Verizon.
The last I heard it was
somebody
still
ran out of
August.
money. Verizon, who told me Verizon ran out of money? So, waiting for the next round of funding. But those are some examples of things that have been, on his.
Are they annual or quarterly, or how,
Annual.
They're an annual.
Okay, and does Joe put together like quarterly roadmaps for meeting milestones within those goals, or it's just once a year we check in and see what happened?
It's up to us.
Okay.
So we could
Check in on
say,
each
we could do a
road.
quarterly check-in, we could say it's a yearly thing. We could also, in the past, we've had different kind of soft goals versus hard goals on different things.
Yeah, I mean, the things that are, so when we review our agenda, we review the goals where they are. If they need to go on the next agenda, we do. Some things don't need to be on the agenda because they don't need to be public debate or public comment, but if they do, then we put them on the agenda at a regular interval to resolve them, but,
Okay.
but I had 5 things just to throw out there to kind of get the discussion going, but, and we can talk about it again at the next week's meeting. But, the things that I would like to focus on now that I'm sort of off of the chair, I would like to focus on the town hall and figure out what we can do with town hall, what the next steps are. Get involved with either revitalizing the committee or an ad hoc group or something. So that's what a big goal for me is figure out what we're gonna do with this building now that we have a lease to move out of this building from the second floor, we need to figure out what we're gonna do with the building.
All right.
So that's one, obviously, a plan for town hall. Joint service, I think that we could continue to look at more. I think that we found that there's a significant savings to having more joint services with either Wenham or regional, and we get a better product. So it's sort of a win-win. We get better people to fulfill the roles, better skill sets, better outcome, and we save the town money. It's more efficient. So we should continue to look at all town departments and look at which ones make sense to combine. And then there's other ones that are sort of just supportive. I think we need to be totally supportive of the master plan process and make sure we're behind that. We need to be, school agreement is another thing I said I was gonna take up after town meeting was we need to open up the school agreement for many reasons and rewrite the school agreement, but we need Wenham and the school board to agree to open up the agreement, so there will be some discussion on that. And then to be supportive of the master plan and the Cutler School project, obviously. And then the last one I had was sidewalks. I think we've done a very light touch on what it would mean to have more sidewalks in this town. We have many neighborhoods that can't get their kids to a sidewalk to get around town, and there's not bike lanes, and we have the ability to do this. We just haven't really looked at it and done a deep dive. So we started touching that, but I think we need to do a deeper dive on what it means to stitch our community together with biking and walking paths, which you think you should be able to get to in a community like this, but there's many communities that can't send their kid on a bike down the street because there's no place for them to ride.
Right. All good?
So those are my 6.
I agree with all those. So I guess do a little brainstorming. We'll obviously talk more about this. I'll have Joe share his goals with everybody previously, and I'll see if I can dig up some previous kind of town manager goals from other reviews.
We typically meet like on Saturday, and that I mean, to get a Saturday on the books up at Patton and a whiteboard and coming up with goals is typically what we do. That's typically our format for that. And this is sort of our brainstorming. Then we sit down on Saturday and sort of narrow it down and make sort of the short-term goals, long-term goals, and then sort of reaches.
Right. To Bill's point there, bring in kind of a laundry list of anything. It could be town manager, it could be just general stuff. And then what we do is we kind of throw it all out on the table and then start categorizing, is this a town manager goal? Is this a select board goal? Could we handle this within the select board? Could Bill do a special little project on something to fix that thing? Or is it more overarching for the whole community? And how can Joe help facilitate that?
Would this be the meeting where folks would be expected to, like, public comment to share goals, or do we not invite the community to give their perspective on goals?
Depends what the meeting setting is.
Okay.
I mean, we always have public meetings, but I would say, if it's our typical every other Monday meeting, more public will probably be there. If we do a Saturday retreat, usually we don't get too many people that show up to add to the conversation.
I should know if you needed to formally say hey, we're gonna be talking about goals. If you have thoughts.
I don't know. Sean, I remember what we did in the past. Before it was just the 5 of us, or the 6 of us. I don't know how that was. It was still.
It was on Zoom last year.
It was on.
It was on Zoom last year.
Varsity was participated.
Right. Right. And typically,
no one else was there.
Right, exactly. And typically, when we've done the Saturday morning thing, or we've done a weeknight, I think we did one at the Boathouse one year, that it's still, we have to post the agenda, post the meeting,
But
and it's a public meeting, but no one shows up to sit on the chair next to us while we have dinner at the Boathouse or something like that, so.
I don't know why not.
This is a good meeting. You talk about good stuff. You get to talk about your dreams and aspirations.
So many dreams.
Anything else from the goal setting that I missed?
When does
I think that my point is that we've been, for the last 2 years, we've done and I talked about it at the town meeting, we did a really good job maintaining this town through a pandemic, and financially we're strong, and we did some good stuff, but I think now that we're sort of through this thing,
right,
we need to take a step back and figure out how we're gonna now improve on what we've stabilized.
Right.
So sort of my goal for the next 2 years of being on the board is sort of to improve on what we've stabilized. I think we did a really good job of getting, of maintaining
right, and
all the challenges we had.
And I think part of it, when you brought up the master plan, Bill, that, some of these goals, are immediate and some are long-term.
Yep.
And we have to kind of figure out the balance between that, because if we, we're not going to have the master planning done before we set these goals for Joe, but some part of it should be helping facilitate the master plan and then acting on it,
No, agree, yeah, agree. It's that short-term, long-term, and aspirational type stuff. that we-
What is the timeline on the master plan?
It usually takes about 18 months. Alex, do you know when the?
I don't know. I know that there was some movement on the consultants team, and so there's a resurging effort. I would say that there is at least another year left in that process.
That was I was kind of guessing next year's annual town meeting-ish
Okay.
timeframe.
Okay.
Anything, Tom?
Nope, nothing for me. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right. It's that time of the night. Anybody want to make a motion?
Move that we adjourn for the evening
I
of
second
this
that.
select board meeting.
I second that.
All right. All those in favor, roll call vote. We'll start with Bill.
William Wilson, aye.
Aaron Knutson, aye.
Caroline Beaulieu, aye.
Tom?
Tom Myers, aye.
And myself, aye. Welcome new members. Glad to have you tonight. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Same. Happy to be here. Thanks.